Doug, when you're ready, we're ready for you. Welcome everyone to Community Enrichment. I'm Heidi with the Coordinating Center, and we're so excited to welcome Doug from AAWDC. I don't want to mess it up. I'll go ahead and hand off to Doug. We're going to start with his presentation, and he may ask for some questions during. But when he's finished, we'll turn off the recording, and then you're welcome to open questions in a very open format. So Doug, without further ado, thank you again for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Doug Allers, and I am the Disability Services Navigator and Ticket to Work Program Manager at AAWDC. Ticket to Work is a program for individuals with disabilities who receive SSDI or SSI who want to return to work. A large part of my role is to help people to get career ready, but also to help them advocate for themselves. This presentation is helping to equip you with the knowledge about the ADA, about reasonable accommodations, disclosure, how to do it, the correct way, and really to advocate for yourself if you do need accommodations or you do decide to disclose your disability. So I always emphasize this in any training I lead, any kind of workshop, and I mean, basically anywhere that I go, I say this a lot. So disability is the only minority group that any one of us can become a part of at any time. So again, it's if you're an advocate, if you're an ally, if you have a friend or family member with a disability, at any point we may acquire a disability. So we may need this information later in life. So it's important to know for everyone, honestly. So today what we're going to talk about is disability disclosure. I'm going to tell you briefly about the ADA and workplace rights, reasonable accommodations, how to request accommodations, addressing discrimination and harassment. And I also provide some resources throughout the presentation. If you have pen and paper handy, I'm going to write down, I will have some helpful resources, and I can also send this PowerPoint out. Actually, Heidi, you already have it. So, feel free to share it because I'm all about, the more people who know this information, the better, because like I said, it helps you to fight for your rights, to advocate for yourself. So let's just jump right into it. Understanding disability disclosure, I do want to emphasize that disclosure is a personal choice. It's entirely voluntary. A company that you are interviewing for cannot ask you about your disability. Now, there may be a question on an application that says, do you have a disability? That could be for EEOC purposes. You're not legally required to disclose your disability at any stage of the employment process. I will tell you that with disability disclosure, again, like I said, it is a personal choice. They can ask, so a company could ask, there's ways that they can ask questions. So it's important to be aware of these types of questions as well. So if someone says something to you like, are there any accommodations that we could provide you with that could help you do your job better? They're asking you if you have a disability. Now, if they're asking you that, that's okay if they're asking every other candidate that they're interviewing that. So if you get that question, then again, like I said, they should be asking everyone they're interviewing that question. They shouldn't be singling a person out because they suspect they have a disability or because that person has a visible disability. The Americans with Disabilities Act protects you from discrimination. Employers, if you do disclose your disability, employers cannot ask specific questions. They can't say things like, well, what is your disability? What does that, what does that limit you? What does that cause? They can't ask you specific questions. It's illegal. You're protected under the ADA. So I've done a lot of research, and these are some actual real world responses. This is from a Reddit thread. of people and, what they say when they're asked about their disability. So an example here, someone says, I prefer not to answer. And instead they discuss their personal needs during interviews. So they said that they require a lot of accommodations, so not disclosing isn't an option. So they may have visible disabilities. They need a lot of accommodations, so they have to disclose. However, this person said that when they found that they selected yes, they weren't getting as many phone calls for interviews. But when they selected prefer not to answer, it got them a call. So they got more calls, and then they discussed it on the interview. This person said, I never say I'm autistic to a prospective employer. If you are capable of handling your own accommodations as they come up, I would elect not to mention it. Now, I will say, I have experience. I've worked with a lot of people. Like right now, I'm working with probably about 75 plus people in my, career timeline. I've worked with hundreds upon hundreds of people, and I've heard a lot of stories about disclosure, about the accommodations. And I do have one, someone who did not disclose their disability. And what happened was, due to their disability, it was causing some lateness and some other concerns that were risen to the employer. And they didn't know about this person's disability, so they were giving this person warnings. You're late. This is the fourth time you've been late. This is your final warning. And then finally, that person chose to disclose their disability. So then the company said, okay, thank you for letting us know. We appreciate this. I wish you would have let us know sooner because we could have avoided all of these, warnings and everything. And they had a form that the person then filled out. So you can see, like I said, it's a personal choice, but if you have a disability that could, you have narcolepsy or something, and it could cause you to fall asleep at work, or it could cause you to be late. In that case, you may want to disclose because you don't want to have problems at work and them not know, and then they have no idea what's going on. So it could come as, you can't be late, you can't do this, you can't do that. We're giving you warnings, and it can get you fired. So keep that in mind as well. Then this person said, my answer is yes, because I'm not entering any employment situation without vocational rehabilitation in Maryland, that's DOORS, and someone legally watching my back. If they're discriminating against you during the hiring process, then they'll likely discriminate against you after you're hired. I've also heard people say, which I like, is that I disclose my disability because I don't want to work for a company that is going to discriminate against someone with a disability. That's not a company whose morals and whose values and whose mission, that I want to be a part of. So, you could think of it that way too. Again, there are lots of ways to look at this, and it is a very personal choice. So it's entirely up to you. Now, what are some reasons so you can throw this in chat, what are some reasons why people may not choose to disclose their disability during the hiring process? What are some reasons you think that people would not want to disclose their disability? And again, you can throw some responses in the chat. So one reason I'll give is, let's see, be looked down upon, Mylene, thank you. Yeah, and label, yep. Past discrimination experiences, Stephanie, that's great. Fear of not being hired. Yeah, these are all very real answers. And discrimination, discrimination is very real, and we know that. And we're living in a world where, we're seeing that. And, I can say in a perfect world, yes, like it would not exist. But there are ways that companies have figured out to, we just went with another candidate. People can say that, and there's really, how do you have a way of knowing? So it's a very real fear, and it is one of the biggest things that I hear, from the customers that I work with, is fear of discrimination. current job and current supervisors. Yeah, I mean, you never know. And, you know, our world is not built for people with disabilities. You know, it's the individuals with disabilities who have had to alter or adjust their lives to this world. It is not the world that has adjusted to that population. So thank you. These are great answers, and they're all very true. So let's go into talking more about disability disclosure, and I'm going to give you kind of the process of you know, application, job interview, and to when you're actually on the job. You can disclose your disability at any time. We'll get into this, but accommodations you can ask for at any time. They do not have to be, you do not have to disclose your disability on the application. You do not have to disclose it during the interview. You know, you might not disclose it until, you know, your disability changes, it evolves, maybe it worsens, and then you have to disclose it to your employer. So it can happen at any time. And the same with accommodations. You are legally allowed to ask for accommodations from the application to any point that you are employed with your employer. So with disclosure, some job applications will ask if you have a disability. And again, that's usually because they're collecting information. You know, it's similar to the questions of race, ethnicity. Answering yes is voluntary. Declining to answer does not hurt your application. As we said, the one person you saw who said that, you know, they don't disclose their disability on the application, they wait until they're on the interview. Understanding Schedule A hiring. So Schedule A hiring authority is a government entity, or it is someone who is getting money from the federal government. So, for example, AAWDC, we operate on grants provided by the federal government, the state government, county government. We have different grant funding sources, and the federal government is one of them. So if it is a Schedule A hiring authority, that could give you a priority. So I have told people in the past, if they're applying for a job that is a Schedule A hiring authority, it could be to your benefit to disclose your disability. Because again, it allows individuals with disabilities to apply for jobs non-competitively. So if you are, you know, if you want to feel, you know, Google Schedule A hiring authority, you can find out more information. I've helped people with applications, and it is said on the application, we are a Schedule A hiring authority. We are contracted from the federal government to, we're mandated to hire a certain amount of individuals with disabilities. So that's basically what Schedule A means. They are required by law to hire a certain amount of individuals with disabilities. If it is Schedule A, it does require proof of disability from a medical professional. It can be beneficial for securing government jobs more quickly. So again, it's not just the federal government. It is also any entity basically that is a contractor with the federal government. So if they get money from the federal government, and most of the time, if you are filling out an application, it will say, we are asking these questions because we are a Schedule A hiring authority, something to that respect. And if you do want to know more, I definitely recommend Googling Schedule A hiring authority, because if you are seeking employment, it can give you kind of a, you know, it can give you a priority with getting hired. So some disclosure benefits versus disclosure negatives. Benefit, access to targeted hiring programs is one, of course, like the Schedule A. Potential accommodations from the start, showing openness. It avoids misunderstandings. Like I kind of told you in the beginning with that little story, you know, if a company hires you and they're not aware of your disability, and there are things that could cause them to kind of, you know, like you're falling asleep at work, or you're showing up late, or you're taking extended breaks, and they're not sure why, they could turn into reprimands, or warnings, like I said. So you want to be careful about that. It offers opportunities for inclusive work culture, which I love. As I mentioned, I've had people who have said, I don't want to work for a company that's going to discriminate against someone with a disability. So yes, I'm telling them right away that I have a disability. Negatives, of course, potential bias. Even though it's illegal, it still happens. Part of my role too is to educate employers, educate business, as tell them about the benefits of hiring an individual with a disability, educate them on accommodations, because on a business side, one of the biggest misconceptions that I hear, and it's well known, is that I'm afraid to hire someone with a disability because it's going to cost me too much money. And the statistic for accommodations, it's under $300. And a lot of times it's free. An employer doesn't have to pay anything, because a lot of times accommodations are things like a hybrid schedule, a remote schedule, closer parking. They're things that aren't going to cost an employer anything. Concern about being labeled, we saw that mentioned in the chat. Concern about being labeled before demonstrating the ability. People still have a lot of misconceptions about disabilities. They're not going to work up. Someone with a disability isn't going to work up to par. They're not going to be able to handle the same level of work as someone without a disability. Those are just common ignorant misconceptions that we still hear today. Employers ask about disability because of affirmative action compliance, data collection for EEO purposes, and they cannot use this information against you in hiring decisions. Disability disclosure on a job interview. So if you move past the application and you've gotten a job interview, which is awesome, you are moved on to that step. At this point, should you disclose? So I tell people, if the disability is visible, it might help to address it positively. It might also help you with for planning purposes. So for example, if you use a wheelchair or a rollator or walker and you need accessible parking, asking that question ahead, I do use a wheelchair. Is there accessible parking? Because I've heard stories about people who have gotten to places and the interview takes place upstairs and there's not an elevator. Asking those types of questions beforehand could be of benefit for you and could alleviate some anxiety, because we all know, with job interviews, it's an anxious process anyway, so it could take out some of that anxiety to know what to expect. If accommodations are needed during the interview, of course, disclosure beforehand is going to be beneficial to you. Best practices for disclosure, keeping it relevant. I require an interpreter for meetings, but that will not impact my ability to do the essential functions of the job. So you are going to hear me say quite a bit essential functions, and I'll get into what that actually means in a few slides. Being confident, so framing the conversation around your skills and how you will excel in your role. Being in a wheelchair has given me very strong adaptability skills. I've learned to adapt to different environments, which has helped me to excel in the workforce, being able to adapt to changing situations, something like that. Focus on your abilities, not your limitations. Focus on the skills that you have been able to acquire through your disability. I help people with resumes all the time, and there are skills that you have acquired through your disability, like adaptability, like communication, like being able to, or having the ability to advocate for yourself and advocate for others. Legal protection. So the employer cannot straight out ask you, do you have a disability? They are not legally, they can't ask you that. They can ask you something like this, and this is kind of what I said before. Can you perform the essential functions of the job with or without accommodations? So I actually get into what essential functions are in this slide. So can you perform the essential functions of the job with or without accommodations? Or they could say something like, are there any accommodations that we can provide you with that can help you do your job better? And they might not be asking that to get more information about, your disability. They could genuinely be like good people who want to know like what they can do to help you to succeed in the job. So can you perform the essential functions of the job with or without accommodation? So what they're really asking is, can you do the main duties of the job? So those bullet points on the job description, can you do those bullet points with or without accommodations? So essential functions are the core duties of the job that must be done. So if a job description says you must be able to lift 50 pounds or more. And that's an essential function. That's the part of the reason why the job exists. You have to be able to lift 50 pounds. If you cannot lift 50 pounds with or without accommodations, then you are not qualified for the job. So with or without accommodations means you can do the job as you are or with some changes. Now, I will say those changes, there's different rules to those kind of changes. So the changes can't fall upon another colleague or coworker. So for example, if the job description says you have to be able to lift 50 pounds and you say, well, I can lift 15, and my coworker over here said that, he'll be able to lift the rest. He'll be able to pick up, where I can't pick up. No, legally, the company is not allowed to do that under the ADA. The work can't fall on someone else. A good example I use is Excel, because I'm not good. To this day, I don't like Excel. I don't understand Excel. So if a job description says, a core function of this job, or it is a bullet point on here, it is part of the reason why the job exists, is you need to be an expert in Excel. Regardless if you have a disability or not, if you are not an expert in Excel, you would not qualify for this job. So you have to remember it's essential functions. You have to be able to do those bullet points within the job description with or without accommodations. We talked about this sort of, but when to disclose. So you can disclose before the interview if maybe accommodations are needed for the interview. Like, for example, you need an interpreter. During the interview, if they're relevant to the job performance. After receiving a job offer, so you might need accommodations to start work. So once you are on the job, disability disclosure while on the job. So again, I want to reiterate, you can disclose at any time. You can disclose prior to the interview, you can disclose on the application, you can disclose in the interview, after starting a job, or when a new disability develops, because I'll always go back to this. Any of us at any time can, acquire a disability. So, we might be working somewhere for 7 or 8 years, and we might, have a disability that happens in our 8th year, and then it's time to disclose. Or we may have a disability, but maybe, I'm managing it right now. I'm managing it, and I don't need to disclose. But at some point during the job, something will happen, and I'll need to then disclose. While you might disclose later, again, if your disability worsens, if you need workplace modifications, if you sustain an injury that requires an adjustment in job duties. How to disclose at work: speak with HR or your supervisor. You could do both. You could, of course, speak with HR and your supervisor. I recommend putting everything in writing all the time. Um, Part of the reason I say that is, of course, to protect yourself. And I don't want people to think, you know, oh, the company I work for, I need to put this in writing because this could bite me later, or they could use this against me. It honestly, some of it is just put it in writing because we're human and people forget, and you might say something in passing and then something happens in 5 minutes and the person's not even remembering. So it's just good to put it in writing. Provide documentation if you are requesting accommodations. It doesn't have to be in detail. It doesn't have to go into, what your disability is. It can just be a letter from a medical professional that says something like, I am treating Doug for whatever it may be, to help him better in his work environment. These accommodations would be helpful. And then it just lists what accommodations would be good. Disclosure cannot be used against you in promotions or in performance evaluations. Some examples of workplace accommodations, there's many. These are common examples that I've seen, and just common examples, in statistically adjusted work hours. So someone might work, maybe start their day at 10 instead of 8. Or they might end early, might end at 3 instead of 5, things like that. Assistive technology, maybe a large print keyboard or a special mouse. Modified workspaces, so a desk that elevates or an ergonomic chair. Temporary adjustments for medical recovery, so you're in a car accident and you sustain a disability and you need to work from home maybe for a couple months, things like that. So, and I'll go more into what those types of accommodations would consist of, when asking for accommodations and how to word it and everything like that as well. Are there any questions? Feel free to throw them in the chat about disclosure before we move into the ADA. All right. So what is the ADA? I said to someone yesterday, I met with someone who is, in a situation where they now need accommodations at work. And I said to them, individuals with disabilities, they had to really, really fight for their rights. Like it was the history of the ADA and disability rights, from staging almost month longer sit-ins in government buildings, to climbing the stairs of Congress, climbing out of their wheelchairs and climbing up the stairs to show the need for these rights. So the ADA was a federal law that was enacted in 1990 to protect individuals with disabilities from discrimination. It applies to employers with 15 plus employees. Key title of the ADA for employment, which is what we're going to discuss, is Title I, which prohibits discrimination in employment based on disabilities. Key terms: a qualified individual. So a qualified individual is someone who can perform the essential job functions. So remember, those essential job functions, you have to be able to do those core functions of the job, those bullet points that you see on the job descriptions. They're the reason that the job exists, with or without reasonable accommodation. Essential job functions, again, are those duties that are fundamental to the position. The ADA ensures that if you can do the core parts of your job, your employer cannot refuse to hire you or treat you unfairly just because you have a disability. And as you can see over here, there are other titles to the ADA. The one that I primarily focus on and the one that we'll be focusing on today is Title I, but there's also Title II, which is discrimination in state and local government service. Title III, non-discrimination by public accommodation in commercial facilities. Title IV, which is telecommunications, and Title V is miscellaneous. So going into Title I, what does it exactly say? So this is exactly the words. So Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 prohibits private employers, state and local governments, employment agencies, and labor unions from discriminating against qualified individuals with disabilities in job application procedures, hiring, firing, advancement, compensation, job training, and other terms, conditions, and privileges of employment. Now, I will tell you, there are still some states who pay sub-minimum wage to individuals with disabilities. That is something that we are still fighting for. is that sub-minimum wage. Luckily in Maryland, minimum wage is set at $15 an hour across the board, but there are some states, believe it or not, who are still paying some workers like $2 or $3 an hour. So, that's just something, a little, tidbit I throw out, that there's still things that, this population is fighting for. What are reasonable accommodations? So reasonable accommodations are changes or adjustments to a job or work environment that enable a person with a disability to apply for a job, perform the job duties, and enjoy equal access to benefits available to other employees. Now, that filters down into, legally, if a company, a corporation is having, let's say, a retreat for their employees, and they are going into the woods for some reason, they need to make sure that, it's an accessible environment for everyone. That if there is someone with a disability on staff, that it's accessible to them. It is things like, having a work meeting at a happy hour. Is the building accessible? Making sure that the building's accessible. So it is equal access to benefits available to other employees. So common examples, I'll say: modifying work schedules, adjusting office equipment or furniture, provide reserved parking, making the workplace physically accessible. These are things that I tell to employers all the time. It is not going to, most of the time, it is not going to cost a lot of money. And I said the national average is it used to be $500, and now it's under $300 that an employer can expect to pay for workplace accommodations, and oftentimes it's free. An important note: accommodations must not impose an undue hardship on the company, which we're going to talk about. That means basically it's a significant difficulty or expense. And I think the next slide, or no, not the next slide, but I do talk about undue hardship. So some tips for requesting reasonable accommodations. First tip I'm going to give you is just like disclosure. When you're disclosing your disability with everything, put it in writing. Always put it in writing. You always want to have a paper trail. Also, understand your needs. Identify the accommodation or the accommodations that will help you perform your job. Be clear and specific. When you ask, state your disability and the accommodations that you need. And you can even go so far as to say, how they will help you to perform the essential functions of the job. A good tip is use the language of the ADA. It's not saying, I am protected under the ADA. This is what you need to do. It's not going about it like that, but it's saying, if you let the company know that you know what you're talking about, then, it's not to invoke fear in them, but it gives you more power, I'll say. It lets them know that, I know I'm protected under the ADA. I know what my rights are, and you legally have to accommodate me, without saying that, bluntly, unless you need to, unless it gets to a point where you need to say it that bluntly to an employer. Always put it in writing. It's not required by law to put it in writing, like I said, but it helps you keep a written record. We're human. I've seen it happen, and I've heard, stories where someone says, well, I asked for an accommodation and they didn't give it to me. Well, and I say, well, did you put it in writing? No, we were walking down the hall, and I said, hey, to my boss, could I get an ergonomic chair or whatever they needed? And yeah, I'll make sure you get that. And then they walk away, and something happens, and we're human, and they completely forgot. And that's why it's best, put it in writing, send an email. I recommend sending it to HR, CCing your supervisor, or the opposite, send it to your supervisor, CC HR. If you don't get a response, follow up in a week. That way, if you have it in writing, you can follow up. Make sure your employer has received the request and is actively working on it. And it can be as simple as, I am requesting, and then you say the specific accommodation because of my state your disability. This will help me to perform the essential functions of my job. If you're using that language, if you're saying this will help me to perform the essential functions of my job, again, that's speaking in ADA terminology. ADA is going to know that. And you can even say something like, I understand that I am protected under the ADA. Here are the accommodations that I need that will help me to perform the essential functions of my job. If you're wording it like that, again, if you're using the language of the ADA, HR will know. Let's go into some examples. A lot of companies, corporations, if it's a government entity, they're going to have forms. A person that I mentioned beforehand who didn't disclose and ran into some, reprimands was then told when they did disclose, here, we have a form, complete this form, get it back to us. We'll make sure that you get the accommodations that you need. State of Maryland, this is an example for the state of Maryland. Say something like this: reasonable accommodation request form, confidential, and then you're just filling out the information. So it's very easy. If you work for a smaller company, they may not have a form. Oh, sorry, our phone systems just beep. They might not have a form. You could then send it in an email. This is an example of that. Dear Ms. Smith, I am writing to formally request a reasonable accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So right there, they mentioned the ADA. To continue performing my job at Summit Solutions, I have been employed with the company since February 2nd, 2015 as a help desk technician in the IT department. If you work for a large company with a lot of people, you might need to say that. I've worked here since this date. This is my role. I am in this department. Recently, I was involved in a car accident that has left me temporarily unable to walk. Based on my doctor's evaluation, I will require at least 6 months of physical therapy, though the duration may vary depending on my recovery process. Given my current medical condition, I am requesting the ability to telecommute or work from home as a reasonable accommodation. As my job responsibilities do not require my physical presence in the office, working remotely will allow me to effectively perform my duties without the undue hardship of commuting. This accommodation would mitigate challenges related to transportation, accessibility, and necessary physical care routines. So again, saying the disability, saying, I can still do my job at home under the ADA. And now this person went so far as to do this. You don't have to do this if you want to, or maybe if you've heard stories about other people requesting, or if you've had issues with your employer already, might be good to put something like this. Under the ADA, employers are required to provide reasonable accommodations unless doing so would pose an undue hardship to the business. I'm confident that a remote work arrangement will allow me to maintain productivity while ensuring my health and well-being. And then I like that they put this too. You could do something like this because request for accommodations is supposed to be kind of a collaborative request. Basically, it's supposed to be collaborative where if the company comes back and says, well, we can't accommodate you with that, they're supposed to offer an alternate solution. Under the ADA, they're supposed to offer a solution. Okay, well, if we can't do that, let's do this. So this person in the letter says, I'm open to discussing alternative solutions that may also meet both my needs and the company's operational requirements. So this is a great letter. It's a great example. Again, always putting it in writing. You have to be able to protect yourself, and the more that you're able to use that language of the ADA and everything, the better. So if you work with a young adult, a youth, if you are a young adult or youth, or someone, for requesting student accommodations, it's a little bit different. You want to know your rights. So under the IDEA Act, individuals with disabilities and Section 504, students with disabilities are entitled to accommodations in public schools. My advice is to parents, guardians, request an evaluation early. If it's in or whatever county, if it's a public school, you can request an evaluation to begin determining eligibility for an IEP or a 504 plan. Collaborate with the school. I've worked with people who have requested accommodations for their students. For their children. Be as involved as possible. Make them know your name. You want to be as involved as possible. Attend all meetings, work with special education, advocate for accommodations. Again, document everything, keeping records of medical diagnoses, evaluations, all correspondence with school officials, if it's a social worker that you're working with at the school, a counselor, keeping record of all of that. Communicating regularly with teachers and staff, so ensuring accommodations are consistently applied in all classroom settings, and encouraging self-advocacy, encouraging our youth and young adults to advocate for themselves, to learn about their needs, learn about their disability, teach them to understand their accommodations and how to speak up, because they're going, the IEP or 504 plan might start in first grade, and it's going to travel with them through high school, but they're going to have a lot of different teachers, and they're going to have a lot of different teachers maybe who think different things, or who might not be as who might show a little resistance to, oh no, we're not giving extra time or whatever, you know what I mean? So you have to teach your child or your youth, young adults, to be able to advocate and speak up. No, I have an IEP. I do get extra time on my exam, or whatever it may be. And review progress annually. Work with the school system to adjust accommodations as students' needs evolve. Because again, this IEP or 504 plan might start in first grade. Well, disabilities evolve and change, and it might need to be fine-tuned. So asking the school system to review yearly to make any changes as needed. And this is just some resources. Again, we're in AAWDC, we're in Anne Arundel County, so that's why I have Anne Arundel County Public Schools up here. But there's also Maryland Disability Law Center, Maryland Doors, and I also recommend, I don't have it on here, but the Parents Place of Maryland, they're based out of Glen Burnie. They are really great, and the Coordinating Center, of course, too. So if finding the assistance that you need, if you do need advocacy or you do need support, they are some great resources. So going into what undue hardship is a legal term that refers to circumstances that can exempt a person or organization from a legal organization. What this means basically in real world terms is if I have a disability and I go into my job and I say, due to my disability, I need a larger working space and I need you to tear down this wall in here. They can come back and they can say, that's going to cost us too much money. It's going to disrupt normal workflow. We don't have the funds to tear down a wall to make your office bigger. However, we could move you to a bigger office, which is down the hall. And that's an example of what a company should do if something poses an undue hardship. So it's a legal term. Basically, it means if it is going to cost a company a lot of money that they don't have, or if it's going to disrupt normal workflow, they can say, this would pose an undue hardship for us. But then they should come up with an alternate solution. So they can't just say no. They can't just say, well, legally, they're not supposed to just say, no, we can't accommodate that. I'm sorry, that's not going to work. Like, if they say that, then they should have an alternate solution and they should be able to justify why they can't accommodate that. An accommodation could be determined unreasonable if the request includes the displacing of another employee, as I mentioned. And a common example, is that the one that I gave, if everyone on this job must be able to lift 100 pounds, and you say, well, I can lift 50, and Joe over here said he'll lift up the additional 50 needed, and he'll do the extra work for me. No, legally that can't happen. Also, you can't, accommodations cannot require that an essential job function can be removed. So you can't say something like, well, I can do everything on this job description except for this. So I'm going to need that taken off the job description. The company can say, no, sorry, then you're not eligible for the job. Like you can't do the job because that's a reason why the job exists. That's a core function of this job. Any questions about that? Undue hardship. I have an example here. Allison works for a small accounting firm with 10 employees. She was recently diagnosed with a neurological disorder that limits her ability to work on the computer for extended periods without breaks. To accommodate her condition, Allison requests that her employer purchase an advanced voice recognition software system, which costs $20,000, so she can perform her duties without relying on the keyboard. So the accounting firm does evaluate her request. They look into it, but they find that the software is just too expensive. They can't afford the software. So they come back to Allison and they say that it's too much. It would lead to additional financial burdens. So is that an undue hardship or not? Is that imposing an undue hardship on the company? Anyone want to guess?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's in this case, the request would be considered, it would be considered an undue hardship. Thank you, Wanda. Because it's the company doesn't have the money to support it. But again, like I said, they should come to Allison and they should say something like, the software that you requested, it's $20,000 and we can't afford that. I'm sorry, we can't meet that accommodation. However, we did find software that's around $5,000. It's just as, it's just as good. We could do that for you. So as long as they're making an effort, as long as they're saying something like, we can do this instead, then they're legally they're following the law. They're following the law. So yes, so that would impose an undue hardship for them. But again, they should try and work with Allison to find an alternate solution. And yes, I can. So Ticket to Work, I can briefly talk about that. So Ticket to Work is a program of Social Security Administration. So AAWDC is an employment network of Social Security Administration. So an employment network is basically an entity. It could be a small company. It could be a single person, but they have contracted with Social Security to provide employment services. So things that we help with include resume support, job support. So we're not a placement agency, but we can help you to find jobs with job leads. We can connect you to hiring events that we have. We can connect you with our business and industry side. We can help to kind of take away that waiting game. We have a lot of connections with employers. It's not always guaranteed. We can never guarantee employment. We can never, it's ultimately up to the employer. If they're going to hire someone, they're going to want to do the same process. They're going to want to interview someone, but we can help to facilitate those connections. I'm also a benefits counselor, so I have been trained and certified to provide counseling on benefits. So like SSDI, SSI, work incentives, because there are a lot of work incentives that people who receive public benefits get when they decide to return to work. Medicaid, Medicare, so I can assist with all of those. So if you are an SSDI or SSI recipient and you're interested in assigning yourself to an employment network, easiest way I can check, and I'll say, is email me, and then we can have a phone call. And if you're comfortable over the phone, giving me your, so I have access to a ticket portal. It's part of Social Security Administration, and I can look up my Social Security number and it'll tell me if you're eligible for the program or not. If you get SSDI, then most likely you are. But I like to look people up because sometimes people are assigned to an employment network and they don't know it. If they're assigned to another employment network, I can't like steal them. You would have to go through a process where you unassign yourself, which is you have to complete a form, you have to send it to Social Security Administration. They have to unassign you from your other employment network to assign with us. So Catalina asked, can you work with, yes, we do. We work with Anne Arundel County resident. And the easiest way to get in is through our Eventbrite. If you go to Google and you search for AAWC Eventbrite, Connecting to Career Services is what you want to look for. It is offered every Wednesday and it is led by our intake team. And they give you the process on how to get in for services, to how to work with a career coach. If you need basic support like resume support, Department of Labor is in our building. They can assist you with that. Like you can walk in basically, and they're here because they're essential employees while the government is shut down. You can walk in Monday through Friday between 8:30 and 3:30, I would say is your best bet those times. And you can get assistance with like your resume. We have a computer lab that's right in our building as well, where you can work with someone from Department of Labor. But yes, if you are in Anne Arundel County, we're located at 613. I'll put it in the chat. So it's the Career Center is 613 Global Way, Linthicum Heights, Maryland 21090. We are here from 8:30 to 4, or 8, I think it's 8:30 to 4. I would just come in somewhere between those times. You can get immediate resume help. We have a whole wall of job postings. If you need more intensive career services, come to that Wednesday information session. It's called Connecting to Career Services. It's virtual, so any Wednesday. It might be every other Wednesday now, but that's how to get in, because that'll tell you that'll give you our application, and you'll need to apply in for services because we do operate on federal, state, county funds. It's a bit of an application process, but if you just need basic support, you can come in anytime and get that from Department of Labor. So let's skip this one just in sake of time. So I do want to give some resources too. So equipment, if you need, and I give this to employers because just realistically speaking, even if an employer has over 15 employees, they might be, that could still be a small business, and they just don't have a lot of the funding, to provide for some accommodations. So here are some ways to get some free ones. So Maryland Durable Medical Equipment Reuse is great. They offer wheelchairs, anything you can think of. There's an application. They may not have it on, they might not have it in stock right the time you need it. The best thing to do, I would say, is call this number if you need something specific. What they do is they take donations. So someone donates a bedside, or let's say a shower chair or something. An example: my aunt needed a walker, and she maybe used it twice and then passed away, and so it was basically a brand new walker. So that's what happens a lot, is that people will donate these items to Department of Aging, and then they sanitize them, they refurbish them, and they give them out for free to the public. I mean, anything from, power wheelchairs, mechanical lifts, hospital beds. Again, it doesn't mean that they'll have it in stock at the time you need it. Best thing to do is to call. This is another great one, Maryland Equips, which is it's the same number, but that's more of like, smaller equipment. So you can see here, like the large print keyboards, a large print timer, magnifiers, calculators, shower heads, fire alarms, wheelchairs. So, it's a lot of again, call them if you need something specific. They may be able to help you with that. So moving in quickly to discrimination. Discrimination, being treated differently or unfairly because of a disability, denial of reasonable accommodations. If they deny your reasonable accommodations, just flat out say, no, we cannot accommodate. I've heard that. I've had customers who have said they told me no. They told me I had to figure it out myself. That's illegal. Retaliation for requesting accommodations. So harassment, verbal or physical conduct based on your disability, that's creating a hostile work environment. Steps to take, always document the behavior. Keep a notebook, and if something is happening at work, write down the in pen, date, time it happens, anyone who was around when it happened, who witnessed it, write down their names, times, everything. Report it. Use your company's HR reporting systems. Seek legal help if you are experiencing discrimination or harassment and it's not resolved internally. Visit EEOC, Maryland Legal Aid. I'm going to skip this, and I'm going to go right into some of the resources for you. So Discrimination Equal Opportunity Commission, in Anne Arundel County. It's 410-209-2742. And every county has their own EEOC office that you can reach out to, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. It's the local office to address complaints of workplace discrimination. Their mission to ensure opportunity for all through the enforcement of Maryland's laws against discrimination in employment, housing, public accommodations, and state contracts. So it's not just employment, also housing, public accommodations. Each county should have an ADA office as well. So Anne Arundel County is I believe, located in Annapolis. So they are ensuring accessibility and compliance with the ADA. And then Anne Arundel County Human Relations Commission, again, every county should have this, advising council residents about discrimination complaints regarding employment, housing, public accommodations, financing, and disabilities in government or private sectors. Disability Rights Maryland, a nonprofit organization staffed by attorneys and paralegals. So they are based in Baltimore City. They're a nonprofit, but they are good to reach out to if you have questions, if you feel that you have been discriminated against or you are experiencing harassment, and you have a disability. And Maryland Legal Aid, that is a statewide private nonprofit law firm that provides free civil legal services to low income and vulnerable people. Anne Arundel County shares their office with Howard County, based out of Annapolis, but they are throughout Maryland. They are another great resource who can help you. And with these resources too, if you have a very specific need or question, if they can't provide it, they have an abundance of resources and connections too. So I'm doing this workshop again, I guess, when is tomorrow? Oh, Thursday. So that's the final. We did National Disability Employment Month. We just got our November calendar event. So, I am one part of AAWDC. I work with the individuals with disabilities and working with the community and the employers and everything. But we have a reentry navigator who works with justice involved individuals. We have a military navigator who works with military spouses, and military spouses and families. We are out in the community at all the different libraries. We offer all kinds of free workshops and events. And yes, I will send that to you, Heidi. And that is everything. I'll leave my contact information up if you have any questions for me. So thank you for joining and for your participation. And I know, Heidi, you want to have questions or anything?
I know we hit time pretty quick, so please send any questions. You can send them to me or Doug, and we'll do our best to make an FAQ if you have any questions. I'm adding my to the chat now.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, but I think you did a great job answering throughout, so I think we're good there. And then I added a link to all the other offices in the state of Maryland for people to reach out to if they have questions outside of Anne Arundel County. And Doug, thank you again. I learned a lot, and this has been really helpful and a great way to celebrate October, correct?
Yes, yeah. And I
All
lead
right, and
presentations throughout like each month. Each month I usually I forgot to put it on the calendar because I was so busy this month, but usually every month I lead like one or two types of these kind of workshops.
perfect. Well, I'll definitely share them in our internal, and then also I'll see what I can share on social media. And then we will be emailing and sending this presentation as well to everyone.
Yep, I'll get that over to you. Or you have it. You have it.
Yep, you're good.
All
Thank you
right.
so much. Have a wonderful
Thank
day,
you.
everyone. And thank you, Doug, again.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
All right. Bye.